Before we started, just wanted to introduce New Horizons to some of you if you aren't familiar with us. Obviously, New Horizons is the world's largest training provider. And could you move to the next slide, Clay? And we're the world's largest training provider with a lot of flexible different solutions. Obviously, we have online as well as in-class training and also mentored learning. And it's taught by a broad spectrum of industry-leading trainers such as Clay himself. And like I said, we're the largest international network. We have over 2,100 classrooms in 56 different countries. And like I said, we do different learning modalities, including online live, which is very similar to what we're going to be doing here today with this webinar. So if you can move to the next slide, please. We have a lot of vendor partnerships. So as you guys know, we're very strong with Microsoft as we're here today talking about SharePoint, but we also do a lot of other things such as CompTIA, IBM, Cisco, ITIL, Adobe. So we're a strong partners with a lot of different things. We're an end-to-end solution, and we're one of Red Hat's better training partners, North American Training Partner of the Year in both 2012 and 2013. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it off to our main attraction today, which is Clay, and he's going to speak to you about SharePoint. So Clay, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you folks. Just quickly about me, in the last 20 years, I've been the director of IT for two different companies, one providing electronic capabilities to pay your IRS taxes online, the other an OBGYN support electronic health records app. And the other thing I've done is shared the opportunity here at New Horizons to deliver some information and hopefully help people, just build their skills a little bit, have a better ability to integrate business and technology. That is one of the key reasons that I was glad to give this presentation. And as you see, I have a lot of certs, but the ones that mean the most to me are process-oriented. I have seen too many times how lack of processes in organizations create a separation of knowledge, a separation of requirement, heck, even a separation of goal. And so I'm very big in process-oriented skill sets and certainly standards and best practices. But here today we're to talk about the 5 greatest ways or top ways that your business can benefit from the use of SharePoint. So the show goes like this. It's all about collaboration. Anything we look at is collaboration, or it's collaborating worldwide and internationally. So the 5 top areas I chose to speak to is, of course, multi-platform access. Today, as I'm sure all of you know, bring your own device has become the great catch acronym of the last 3 years, and it is going faster and faster across our country, of course, and the entire world. So how do we provide that access to all those different platforms and browsers? So a piece of that can be done through SharePoint. Another key element I want to speak to for a bit today is business process management. Sometimes our technology gets in the way of business process management, and we end up having isolated technological solutions that do not bring together information the way that would be best to ultimately accomplish the requirements of the business. Then, of course, there is work performance reporting. In other words, how are we doing? What are we doing on a day-to-day basis? And again, whether it's in the field or in a virtual environment, or it is in a manufacturing arena, or if it's finances where things change so fast we need integration with quick changing databases that have higher levels of security. We can do that with SharePoint. The 4th topic I'll mention today and speak to a little bit is called federated access and control. One of the solutions that we all need in large businesses today, and some of us even in small ones, is the ability to bring together different individuals from different areas, different organizations, and certainly that means giving them different mechanisms for securing that access to that data and what level of control they have to that data. Many people need to see data, have no reason to change it. So how do we bring that into the big picture with our partners in other organizations, and of course throughout our own organization. Perhaps we have multiple separated administrative areas and bringing them together. And the fifth thing I'll speak to is something called the SCMAS. If you're not familiar with the SCMAS, what it stands for is the Service Knowledge Management System. In essence, what we wish to accomplish, what we hope to accomplish, is get the right information to the right people at the right time. And there are a lot of things throughout SharePoint that will allow us to do that. So I'm going to spend a little time on each of these, and then I'm certainly going to take any questions you may have and do my level best to answer them for you. So let's fall back into this concept of multi-platform access. Multi-platform access is becoming more and more important each and every day. It is, of course, the focus of Windows 8 and 8.1 was to extend the ability to allow folks to use devices that were not specific to the organization in order to access data and to share data. We have many different computer operating systems that many of us call our phone. Of course, I think that our phones are just computers that happen to have an application to make a phone call. So looking for a way to integrate those different choices with those outside of our organization who wish to use our particular information and who we need to integrate with our information, and those within it. So the huge issue, of course, with any electronic health records, because you're going to have folks accessing them from the private sector. You're going to have doctors and mid-level practitioners, and they're not always, so in fairness, they are always not part of the same organization. So how do we allow all of them to get to the same data? SharePoint gives us a great way to do that. SharePoint will integrate to manage mobile devices that are not part of your actual organization, and also those that are. It does that by integrating with System Center 2012. Of course, the R2 version of System Center gives us administrative control of security of our mobile devices, whether or not they are part of our domain, if you will, or our Active Directory environment. It also allows us to query them, keep good information about who's carrying what type of mobile devices so that we can best benefit our development of custom business solution applications so they can be accessed across those different devices, and actually gives us the ability to shut them down. Well, everyone is not going to use System Center R2, so you have the ability to use one of the cloud services integrated with SharePoint called Intune from Microsoft. This also allows you to help manage the mobile devices that access your data. Mobile Iron is not a Microsoft product, at least I don't think they've bought it yet, but it is yet another well received in our industry management capability for mobile devices. And so that also can be used to control browser levels and to keep browsers secure on these mobile devices as they access our data. And our friend Exchange continues to grow, and Exchange Active Sync, working with SharePoint and Intune, actually can help manage the Apple iOSs as well as between the two of them, the Droid-based operating systems. Most every common browser today can access SharePoint. Most of them have unlimited, or I should say unrestricted use. Of course, ActiveX would change that if it was in our websites, and there are some anomalies to that. But when you look at the operating systems, whether they are the Androids, which I call the desserts, or whether they are the Apple operating systems, which you could call the cats or you could call the fruits, and the Microsoft products, whichever of those a mobile device is running, we can provide secure access to SharePoint data and integration with SharePoint processes and workflows. Even the Nokia, who has a very specific proprietary browser, also useful here. And our friends at BlackBerry, we don't want to ever leave them out. They still can access most all of SharePoint as well. The operating systems, whether they are browser-based or they are mobile phone-based, most of the common and well-understood browsers are absolutely capable of accessing. So whatever platform, we can give them access. And if we have needs for extreme security, our data is what we present through SharePoint. So we need to apply some type of access control. We can do that in a lot of ways, and more with this bring your own device concept, we need to be able to identify the device without it being part of our Active Directory realm, if you will, our organizational network. We still want to be able to identify it. We then can identify a user. We can use both of those things, a user who is part of our organization and administrative access, and a device that is not. We can then create rules using dynamic access control to apply to which pieces of the SharePoint data we have exposed they can get to. In this way, it helps us address the concept of providing multi-platform access across our modern industry and the world. Now from there, we're going to turn the page and we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is business process management. Business process management takes a great deal of planning, of course, and of buy-in. Well, those SharePoint could assist with, but it also takes a great deal of technology. The ability to gather information from different repositories of data, whether it is from our personnel databases or our proprietary databases of copyrighted information, intellectual property, if you will. Of course, the integration of different approval processes, so critical in business process management. The ability to have a particular action be done, but then also approved, so that there is actually an understanding that the requirement that was set forth in the plan was actually met. One of the things that SharePoint gives us, many of them, but workflows, out-of-the-box workflows, where we can send processes either using forms or using lists, even email, and we can send those particular processes through different approval authorities and ultimately engage many folks who are not geographically close, nor do they have schedules that permit them to be tied together in meetings. Yet their authority, their expertise can be brought together through these workflows. Some very good workflows out of the box for SharePoint, and then we can customize them. We do not have to be super wonderful developers in order to customize them. You can do it with an application very simple to use, and SharePoint has that capability. Or if we do have a solid internal developing team and organization within our company, they can develop any type of workflow requiring automatic access to certain data that's highly restricted and secure, and also manual approvals, perhaps even biometrics. So much of this is intended to allow the integration of different skill sets without having to compromise people's schedules and without having to bring them all into one central location, also giving them ability to exercise their authority in these business processes. A key element to any business process is version control, and it's a part and principle to SharePoint, the ability to not allow the major version of a document to be changed by a large group of folks, to isolate that to a small role, perhaps one or a few folks, and still allow collaboration using minor versions on these documents, so you can bring these skill sets together and ultimately create an environment where the business process is integrating all the different verticals in your business. Manage metadata through SharePoint sounds like a big word. What it means is that we can categorize things quickly and easily, whether it is a document or a component, whether it is a form or a department. We have a quick way of categorizing that information, and the way in which we categorize it is maintained universally across our SharePoint environment, actually can be extended to other SharePoint environments as well, which we call forms. External content types and lists Part and principal to SharePoint is the ability to connect to external business repositories of data, to expose certain parts of that data to be utilized in a process without opening that data to be modified. And this, of course, provides the security to the owner of that data, and many of those folks oftentimes are not very inclined to allow access to it. This way we can allow them to control exactly what pieces they give us and how they wish to provide the level of access to that information. This gives us the ability to bring in managed metadata, which is what we call content types, from external content outside of SharePoint, and then integrate it with SharePoint content, again providing a wider volume of capability within your business processes. Workspaces, one of my favorite when it comes to business processes, it allows us to implement these collaborative capabilities of SharePoint, but to isolate them to just a specific group. This is very useful in a project management environment where you have a different project management team than you do a full project team. There may be a lot of planning behind the scenes, which we separate from the actual work assignments, if you will. And so that's possible by using different workspaces. It is also very possible to do proof of concepts where we typically don't engage the entire workforce, typically a very small statistical sampling of our workforce and our expertise is involved in proof of concept projects and initiatives, and of course Workspaces allows us to accomplish that. And then the one that is key to all organizations, the ability for strategic collaboration for individuals who might be a little higher, let's be honest, who quite frankly are higher on the authority level of our org chart, and to allow them to have a secure environment to throw things on the wall, to discuss new decisions, to contemplate new business initiatives, all without having to concern themselves with some other SharePoint user accessing that information. So these are just things that allow us to help address business process management, and I think it's fair to say that every business wants to find a way to improve their processes, especially integrating IT with the business so the technology experts are on the same page as the business experts. This is a very useful tool to accomplish that. Excuse me. Now, every business I know should work on an adage that says, if you cannot count it, it doesn't count. In other words, if you do not have the ability to measure it, it's very hard to control and therefore to manage. This means that we should be able to expose the blinds and show us all of the performance information coming from our organization, to see all the different pieces of data and hopefully put them into format and a collection that makes it information. You know, data is fairly useless until we put it together and combine it so that it can make and be useful. So there are several pieces within SharePoint that allow us to report how we're doing and to maintain solid distribution of information so everyone kind of knows where we are. And that allows them to know, of course, what might we need to prioritize as an issue to address first. So there is much within the SharePoint environment that provides this business intelligence. Each version of SharePoint since 2010 has added more. Actually, since 2007, one should say. There was a major structural hierarchical difference between SharePoint 2007 and 2010. That structure has been maintained in recent versions and upgrades, but all of them gave us more and more business intelligence. Now, business intelligence, another one of those terms, gets batted about quite a bit. Well, what is business intelligence? It's the ability to take data and to communicate it to those who need it, to turn it into information, and to provide that information to those who need it. But the first thing you have to have is the solid data. The integrity of your data has to be valid. And so there are several different ways we can integrate the expertise of our personnel who are experts in Visio are experts in SQL or Oracle or other database mechanisms and architectures, who are experts in business processes, who understand the customer, who understand the customer's business. All of these are different groups of expertise, and SharePoint provides an excellent opportunity for them to deliver their observations, their specific information about how we're performing in an organized way that all can access it. So part of that is Performance Point Services, which prior to 2010 was a separate product altogether. It was a separate SKU. And of course, as many of you know, SharePoint is now the top SKU from Microsoft, the #1 seller. And what happened in 2010 is that Performance Point was integrated into SharePoint. And Performance Point gives you physical, visual representations. It is easy to see milestones, far more easier to see milestones than it is perhaps to see detailed work schedule. It is easier to see how we're performing with respect to a range, like with a RAG chart, as opposed to trying to go through and look at every piece of data. You know, without that concept, we would be looking at data like many of us look at airline flights in an airport, just list after list after list, and you're trying to query and find that. But with good Performance Point services, that data can be manipulated, if you will, and managed underneath the surface of the exposed web environment that gives us dashboards, that gives us RAG charts, red, amber, green charts, and the like, to help us understand what kind of information is available and how are we doing. Excel services allows us to use a website, for all intents and purposes, to allow collaboration with Excel worksheets, to allow folks to work together with Excel, whether they happen to be at a machine that actually has the application Excel on it, or they just have a supported browser that can access that. And this allows them to work together, and more importantly, perhaps, to share information on the fly. One Excel worksheet may have one group of data coming from our sales organization. We have this many sales from account rep X and account rep Y of this many widgets and this many thingies. We also have coming from a completely different source how many widgets and how many of these thingies, if you will, these different components, products and services, reports, whatever it is, how many of those do we have available? How many are being produced? That information will come from a different source. So the ability to bring that information together in a spreadsheet online is what Excel services, one of the things Excel services gives us. Of course, the integration with SQL Server and reporting services through SQL Server is also part of the DNA now. SQL is the back end of SharePoint, so there are many applications that automatically take advantage of the reporting services aspect of SQL Server and integrate that into our particular environment, that integrate the reporting mechanisms, which is kind of what is used to make sense of the data and to provide the information that some key stakeholders at any level, whether it is high-level stakeholder, feet-on-the-ground stakeholder, to get the information they need to best perform their job. Since SharePoint is allowing this information to be gathered in real time, the reports that are delivered through the integration with reporting services can actually show real-time information. How many do we have? How fast can we get it to you? What is the current market value? If you're finance industry, something you want to know is right now, what is that financial value of a particular component? We'll just leave it at that. This is information that needs to get there as soon as possible. So the integration of reporting this information through SharePoint from different sources becomes a critical and really elementary increase to our business productivity. Visio services also similar to Excel, except now we're going to have web environments where we can use a supported browser, a mobile or operating system, where we can visually see the integration of our components. That's a huge, huge element, of course, to IT and, of course, to business. What makes up our packages? What components come together to deliver a product or a service or an approval or a schedule? And that information is oftentimes much easier understood when we can see it represented and work with that. Of course, Visio services allow that visual graphic delivery of that information to be updated in real time, because it, just like Excel services, can be connected back to data repositories either within your SharePoint environment or not. So it doesn't have to be under the control of the SharePoint administrators, but it can be updated real time, and it can be delivered graphically and visually with the Visio services, whether or not we have that Visio software on the device that we are connecting to the portal with. Okay? There is in 2013, they have a new concept to just PowerPoint. It's called Power View, and it does, of course, allow collaboration and sharing of, if you will, presentations and slide decks. But more than that, it allows to collaborate on the view of other data, of data cubes, if you will, of looking at different types of information gleaned from data and bringing that into a collaborative solution. Similar to, but not near as mature as some of the other collaborative environments, like the one you're using now from Citrix and many others that exist. Then, of course, you do have Power Pivot. And if you're an Excel enthusiast, you love Power Pivot. The ability to slice and dice data without compromising the integrity of how we store that data, so that that data can be useful, and so that we can find the particular pieces of that data and hopefully ultimately make some sense out of it so it becomes information. Power Pivot allows us to do that, and we can present that through our SharePoint websites. Now, one of the elements to international businesses is that, yes, this data and this reporting of data is important. And yes, the need to follow business processes is important. The reality is, many of the folks who need to be part of that process, many of the folks who need to engage in utilizing or submitting that information. Take, for instance, a manufacturer of some raw material or good that we sell, for them to automatically let us know how many have been shipped, how many are on the way, how many are waiting for. They are not part of our organization. So what should happen is that our processes and our reporting and the information should fade in and out together with all of those federated partnerships we might have, whether they're our mother company and we have separated administrative centers, separated administrative control, whether they are partnerships, vendors, consultants, external collaborators that share in positive opportunities, whether they are simply accessing without us knowing who they are. Anonymous access, right? What sprung the beauty and the expanse of the World Wide Web? It is anonymous access. So one of the key elements to allowing SharePoint to be effective and save business money is to consolidate the actual data, and the information, the processes and the forms, the capabilities that are available to not only ourselves and our internal users and personnel with different and varying levels of access control, but also to our partners, our external organizations. Here at New Horizons, as you heard Anthony speak, and which is absolutely true, we have partnerships with a great number of well-respected technology providers throughout the world, actually. So to allow that information to come together, yet still providing the security level that both or all parties need. This integration is called federation, and it has taken a huge step forward in the world in the last 6 to 8 years. Today, most people understand it because you have, say, a Microsoft account you use, or you have an iCloud account you use. You have an account you can use that allows you to access information in many different organizations. And the reason that that is possible is federation. SharePoint is fully capable of providing federation to our partnerships to give us that capability, the ability to share information, to collect information, and to modify information if wished through different entities from different organizations, not our own, and perhaps those we don't even know. This is a huge piece today, and SharePoint provides it in a most unique way. You can have all of the combination and many of the tools we've mentioned so far, the external content types and lists that come from information that has nothing to do with SharePoint and the SharePoint administrators cannot change. You can bring that in to a list or into a document. You can bring it into a workflow. You can bring it into a process that is available in a web browser. From those we trust, those we don't know, those who are part of our organization, and we have a varying level of trust within those different, what we like to call security principles, groups of folks and their access rights, and then of course partners that we need, that we require on a day-to-day basis. The way that SharePoint provides this is your data can all be collected in a group of databases, accessed through a number of different web interfaces, but we can give them different namespaces. So the same content that's available to me at my company, sharepoint.mycompany.com, is also available to an anonymous user at www.mycompany.com, except we are going to restrict that access and authentication because we set up a different path. We also are going to have mypartnervendor.org, who I need to come in and access this information, perhaps share this information. We can give them a separate namespace altogether, which is simply another URL, and they can come through that particular URL, and we can now leverage authentication using what is known as claims. Claims authentication is what provides the availability of using federated access and control to use non-internal entities and to verify that we know them based on a set of criteria. That's what a claim is. We look at that access, and if that access attempt presents some criteria that we know, then we let them in. You know, kind of a metaphorical analogy is if we're having a large family reunion, then somebody would present, even though they're not from my town or my city or even my country. My last name is McKenzie. There are a lot of McKenzies around, that they have some way of showing us they really are a McKenzie and part of the McKenzie clan. This is an example of a claim. And then whatever way we agree with our partners to check one another, each other's entities, and to provide that authentication mechanism, we can do it that way. Completely different access allowed through that mechanism than is allowed through the anonymous public access, and certainly than is allowed to the internal access to our sites and our site libraries and our list and our customized web apps that are provided through SharePoint. Same content, but we can control different levels of access based on how well we know someone or if we know them at all. And this federation, when implemented successfully, restricts the content repositories to where they are easier to back up, which makes them easier to restore, which makes them easier to be redundant. And it is accessible no matter what device, as we mentioned very earlier, that they may try to use. as long as their device is supporting the level of authentication, how we're going to prove who that person is that is needed for accessing that content. This is, in my opinion, one of the largest untapped resources that SharePoint provides by controlling what access who has to which data through different URLs, which we call web applications, that bring you into that umbrella of data. Now, with all of those things being said, in the end, great challenge for most companies I've worked for, is still today the ability to get information to the right people. You know, if we have the perfect integration of our business processes, allowing federated users to access and become part of those processes, to deliver information so we know how well we are doing and how well or how quickly or how slowly we can go forward based on availability of resources. If we understand that we can provide that access to many, many different platforms, literally the most popular without a doubt, mobile devices and what I've been calling operating systems. Obviously every computer has an operating system, but with operating systems we're talking about typically tablets, laptops, convertibles, towers, servers, that all those can do that. If we understand that SharePoint gives us that capability, it provides us the sweetness of the honeycomb of being able to get the right information to the right people at the right time. I mean, that's truly what we want to do. That's what we're engaged in, and that's what saves businesses money. You see, this concept of getting the right information to the right people at the right time actually has a structure, and that structure is proven to work. One way of putting it is, data is useless and wisdom is priceless. Data is simply stuff, right? Blue, 15, 78, 487%, just pieces of data. And that can come from all over. SharePoint allows you to submit that data in simple email. You can send an email to a URL, and it, of course, becomes part of the data that is now collected in that repository. Different databases identified and secured within SharePoint just for the use of SharePoint, and also, as we have mentioned, databases from other repositories that is not managed by SharePoint at all, may come from a completely different organization and definitely come from a different vertical in our own company, in our own organization. Bringing that information in, changing the metadata so that as I bring that data in, I can give it some labels, some categories. I can give it some information about information. This is what metadata is. I can tell it whether it's confidential. I can tell it where it's external. And so it could be external, internal, or we have a whole different field where it can be, of course, confidential, secret, top secret, public. All of that is data. And we can bring that in different forms and we can store it in different lists. But then we have the ability within SharePoint to turn that data into something that makes sense, to make use of that data by assembling it so that information can be gleaned. You know, information is where we can start to see what. You know, the data lets us know the basic components and we put it together. And information can be controlled in libraries with different work folders in SharePoint, certainly with the SSRS, with the integration of SQL Server reporting services. That capability is available to us there, bringing the meaningful use of data and presenting it through dashboards, presenting it through reporting services or Visio or Excel, to expose that information through document centers where those documents can't be modified, where versioning is maintained, where those particular locations is where we can get the document of choice. I believe if you asked yourself in your experience, has there ever been a time in your work utilizing computers at any level, for most of us it's anything we've done for the last 25 years, where people had different versions of the document and how damaging, how costly that can be to the business. Well, document centers were taking that data and we're now turning it into information. It is the acceptable version that we can use. All of those are different ways of making sense out of the data so it becomes information. Well, once you have information, what we want to be able to do is learn how to leverage that information. How are we going to use that information? That information can help us make decisions. That information can help us prioritize. That information can help us facilitate and direct. That information, when it starts telling us how lets us know the action we can take based on that information. And that's what knowledge gives us. That's where knowledge comes from. Knowledge, I mentioned here, just a few simple concepts. Data cubes, allowing us to evaluate the data that is presented in an information mechanism known as a cube and then take an action on it. A custom web app that can utilize this different information and make decisions. We can put, we can put logic into that web app to utilize the information and ultimately make decisions on what's going to happen, what gets created, or what steps are next based on that information. And a critical and elementary piece. Anytime I walk into an IT organization, between you and me, there are two questions I ask. And the first one is, do you have a solid configuration management system? And do you have an existent change control system? And both, of course, supported greatly with SharePoint, but the CMS allowing the different data from where servers are and what code is and what doors are open and which doors are based on zones and what hours of operation, what different pricing, what different platforms, all that different data put and assembled into information can now be understood, and we can make decisions on what changes to make, what changes not to make. We can make decisions on what we have a skill set for, because our configuration management system is going to give us the relationships of all our components. And this, of course, allows us to leverage that, and this is knowledge. I would love to say that wisdom can come from technology, but what technology can do for us is it can allow us to enhance the control of wisdom. Once we have identified what successful use of information is, and when we self over time, and after all, that's what wisdom is. Professional wisdom, also often called expert judgment, is the ability to continue to improve our decision making, to ensure the solid decisions we have validated are carried out and are implemented and are affected, and to have as much automation around that is a wonderful thing. Automated workflows gives us that capability. Archives is historical information. And there is an old adage, my friend, which is true. It says that not every change is an improvement. I think you would agree with that. Not every change is an improvement. However, every improvement is a change. And the ability to understand the best way to make those changes, it comes from our historical knowledge. It comes from what we called in the old days and still do sometimes knowledge base. It comes from the more common term lessons learned, post-mortem. All of this is archives, and they become priceless because wisdom is priceless. You have to earn it. And if we archive our information so that we can access it as part of our business processes, then we are becoming more and more expert judgment, creating better professional wisdom, if you will. And then records, there is a difference. In the world of SharePoint, between a record and a document, and a record center is legal. It is binding. It is a place for us to ensure that we have archived the appropriate information from a legal perspective and that individuals can access what those particular specifications, regulations, and standards are that we adhere to, whether they come from the governance from our own company or outside sources that are either recommendations or regulations with legal teeth and with legal impact. So those are some of the things that allow us to take data, which by itself is useless, and to ultimately convert it into wisdom, which in and of itself is priceless. And SharePoint gives us the technologies to accomplish that. You know, it is ultimately the combination of solid, well-planned, and implemented processes with the expertise and knowledge of modern, some might say cutting edge, but at least widely accepted technologies, and to bring those technologies and to bring those processes together to ultimately give us the best way SharePoint can help our business. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
So one of the questions I've gotten a couple times, and I'll answer for you, Clay, is will this be on YouTube and where can I find it? Yes, it will be on YouTube, and the way you'll be able to find it is if you go to www.youtube.com/NHSocal, so N as in new, H as in horizons, SoCal as in Southern California, so youtube.com/NHSocal, and I'll put that in the chat box for everyone as well.
Very nice. Thank you, Anthony.
So if there are any other questions, feel free to type them in right now, and I can relay them to Clay. So I'm not seeing any questions popping up, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everyone for coming out. I see a couple popping up right now, actually, though. So we have a question, Clay. It says, does New Horizons provide training on setting up the federations?
Absolutely, we do. Of course, that simply depends on which version of your domain controllers you are running. And of course, I'm working on the assumption you have an organization that is running Microsoft Active Directory. If you are running Server 08 or 08R2, there is a class, of course, that provides that. And if you're running 2012, there's a class that includes that, Server 2012 or 2012R2. In addition, there's a 3-day class. As far as availability and when those run and specific numbers, of course, your New Horizons rep would be glad to get that for you.
We have another question that says, do applications reside on the top of the SharePoint?
Do applications reside on the top of SharePoint? The best way to answer that is that applications can exist within the presented data of SharePoint. SharePoint's a big umbrella. So when we say web application, and that may be where the question's coming from, and if not, please clarify. But when we say web application, we're talking about the doorway into all the different capabilities of SharePoint. And you can have many different web applications. A lot of organizations simply choose to use one, and those 5 different accesses are what we call zones. But that web application speaks to literally the connection of the doorway to the web server, in our case, of course, IIS, that allows you to get into a myriad of different applications if you wish to choose them. So if I come into a SharePoint site, I could go in through the tree of that site, and I could literally access 10s and 20s 10 or 20 or more different what we typically call web-based applications within the hierarchy of the highest element, which SharePoint calls the web app.
I have another question that says, what are your thoughts on Project Server 2013?
Well, first of all, I am a huge believer in any PMIS somebody makes use of. I think that Microsoft has been working with an enterprise-level project management solution long enough that they probably worked out a good chunk of kinks. I do warn folks that what we should look at first is the requirements of our PMIS, our Project Management Information System, because a key element to that is what level of granularity do you want and what is your integration factor. So I think without a doubt, Project Server 2013 is a valid and valuable product for the price point. I do know that some organizations might turn to Clementine or Primavera for a different presentation of what's happening under the hood. Most project managers realize that the Project Management Information System does a great deal of work under the hood for us today that 20 years ago PMs had to do on their own with pen and paper. And so as long as that effectiveness is meeting the requirements of your company, I think you're well served with Microsoft Project Server. But I do warn folks to first lay out the requirements and then do a little comparative analysis against those solutions. And part of that is deciding your selection criteria too. So you'll never hear me, at least I hope you never hear me say this is the best product that you can ever buy and there's no product better than that, because I think in our modern world of technology, that's an unfair statement.
I have a question here that says, is it possible to load entire folders easily into SharePoint as a list repository, maybe through a batch or user end GUI?
The UI I'm not sure is going to exist for them. Certainly a PowerShell batch would be the quickest way to do that by converting documents into list is what I'm hearing the question say, Anthony. Documents into list. As far as uploading documents into
entire folder, yeah, he said yes.
Yeah, so turning documents into list can be done. I do not know of course, I've never seen a baby pigeon alive, but I do not know of any part of the user interface that allows that conversion automatically. But it seems it would be a very useful, therefore a very available PowerShell script. As far as dumping documents into a folder in SharePoint, which we call a library, and then the libraries have folders within them, that's pretty much click and drop.
He was wondering if there's any links about that or anywhere that he could go, Derek could go to find more information on that.
Yeah, I mean, it may sound like a caged answer, if you will, but without a doubt, TechNet and the script guys, they're called the script guys, and it's not all guys, but it's a group of folks that create a lot of scripts, and then the MSDN SharePoint, whatever version you're on, 2010 or 2013, has some good information about that as well. I don't have any right off the top of my head that I feel are any better than that, but it doesn't mean that there's not some other experts out there that are not in the Microsoft portals.
He said, thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.
So if there are any other questions, I don't see any right now, but Clay and myself will hang out for another couple minutes. But thank you to everyone that showed up today. We had a great turnout, and I hope you all have a great 4th of July holiday. And again, Clay and I will be here for a few more minutes if you have any other questions. Thank you.